Okay, on to Etude number 2 of the Opus 25 series by Chopin. This one's in F minor. Let me first play for you the opening sequence, about 10 seconds of music, 10, 15 seconds of music, give you a sense of what you're up against, and then the tutorial will begin proper. And I'll give you all the tools you need to learn it yourself. But to start, here is what the music sounds like. All right. The first thing I want you to think about is what you want this music to sound like at the finish line. When it's all said and done, when everything is learned, all the techniques are in place, what would you like the aesthetic of the music to be? What do you want? What kind of message? What kind of feel? Would you like to convey when you're playing this piece? It's not enough that this piece is just fast. It has to also be musical. I would suggest, first of all, that in the right hand, both in the left and right hand, but especially in the right hand, yes, it's fast, but it's also very delicate, very legato, so very well connected, and very effortless. As you play this piece, you should make every effort, ironically enough, to be as effortless as possible, to have it almost feel as though it's of its own accord, just runs of its own accord. It doesn't require any impetus from you. From the point of view of the aesthetic of the piece, or what kind of world you're creating here, to me, it seems very small scale, this piece, right? It's not some grandiose thing. It's very much the opposite. It's like a little Fabergé egg, or like a music box. And the left hand is the kind of heartbeat of the music box, the mechanical lever that churns and allows the right hand to run. Here's what the left hand sounds like on its own. Doesn't it? Okay. That being said, we have to have a look at the left hand first. Once you have both of the hands in play, most of your resources, cognitive resources, will be allocated towards obviously the right hand. That's where all the difficulty is. So we have to first get the left hand really well under our belt, to such a degree that you don't really have to think about it too much. You just kind of intuit the phrasing of it, and then your hands more or less play. So we have to really make sure that the left hand is really well learned. The left hand and the right hand are very, very simple, rhythmically speaking. The left hand is all just a string of quarter note triplets. The piece is in 4/4 time, common time, and F minor, but we begin in the dominant of F minor, which is an inversion, an open inversion of C dominant 7. This is where we begin. 5. Reach across to the thumb. 2, 3. And then the top 2 notes repeat. I'm pressing the pedal, but really you don't need that at all. I think it just makes it easier to follow what I'm doing. As a little aside, I think this piece should be played rather dry, not too much pedal. Wherever there is pedal, it's there just to blend sections together. Sections where you might have to jump and you want there to not be a gap between that jump. You can use the pedal to elide those jumps. That's your opener. 6 notes in every bar. Next, the pinky rises, and it'll rise on its own since you're so far up, to an F, resolving to F minor. 5, 1, 2, 4, and the top 2 notes repeat. with these two bars, you have to kind of take this on board early, otherwise you might develop a very stiff wrist. You have to be very free to move. So after the first note, you kind of sit down a little bit on the G, and then you do a sort of a swoop. You can kind of allow your wrist to create an oval. And then same thing over here. This movement, this breathing of the wrist is extremely important. Otherwise, you will tighten up and potentially hurt yourself, but at the very least ruin the piece. So a freedom in the wrist is crucial here. Moving on. G. Up to B flat in the thumb. 2, 3. And the top two notes repeat. So here we have a little diminished chord, which then resolves into the next bar to an F minor first inversion. 5/4, 2 and 1. This fourth bar, thankfully, there's no jump here. It's the first two notes are within an octave, so there's no need to do anything special here. Although I would recommend, and actually suggest rather strongly, that you do still maintain the fluidity of the wrist. Stitch all that up. Play it as slow as you need. I'm kind of giving you the general layout here, the path to walk, but as you're playing this, you should feel no impulse or, you don't need to play it as fast as I do. That's all I mean to say. Now, once you have that down, I want you to start to notice what's happening here in terms of harmony and melody, right? What is the skeleton of this? This is essentially what we have here. And then moving forward. Right. That is the nutshell. In a nutshell, that is what structures these four bars. And in fact, the same skeleton continues throughout the piece. Right? You have the bottom line and the insides, which just fill out the harmony. Right? So with that in mind, that's how you should be phrasing, right? So this one kind of leads the way. So a little bit more, and then relax. You can do whatever you really want to this, phrase it however you want, but you have to be aware of this skeleton that sort of undergirds everything. That'll make it much more musical as you're starting to actually turn this into music, as you sort of progress and transition from an etude into a musical etude. Cool. To achieve this musicality at the outset, one thing that I'd like you to do, as I said before, is drop down, sort of sit down on the first thumb in every bar. I'll exaggerate it to make it obvious. And then once you have that in play, later on you can draw that back and make it a little bit more subtle. But that is how you should be, I think, phrasing. Cool. That is it. I think that's enough. I think that's pretty good. Later on, we can talk about how to add the pedaling into the mix to maybe bridge that jump. Should you wish to do that. But for now, let's have a look at the right hand. The piece begins with a C pickup note, which ties into the first beat of the next bar. And then the right hand begins to run. Let's add that pickup note later. Let's have a look at first just what is essentially the pattern here that we have to come to terms with. So I'm now omitting the opening pickup note and starting directly from the first full bar as though there is no pickup. Some editions actually don't even have a pickup note, or excuse me, they don't have a tie between the pickup note and the first note of the next bar. Some do, some don't. But in any case, I'm going to ignore the pickup for now and just have a look at the first full bar. That's our opening little turn. 1, 3, 2, 1. Both of these fingers sit above. They sit above the thumb here. Right, so 1, 3, 2, 1. Next. 4, 3. And then the same turn again. Ending with F sharp to G, 4 and 5. As you're learning this, you can really put a gap between each of these units, just to be very clear, to clarify in your mind what the beginning and end of each section is, and then later on, you can stitch them up. So there's your first one, second, third, and fourth. Once you've learned that quite well, stitch them up as slow as you need. No need to match my tempo here. Next bar begins the exact same way. Turn. 4, 3. Another turn. And the last two notes are the only thing that's different. Instead of a F sharp to G, we have 5 to 3. Like that. Now let's put that together. As I said, the rhythm is very simple between both the hands, so aligning them is very easy. Basically, what you have here is 2 notes in the right hand for every 1 note in the left. So a little slower. Here's your first bit. Next. Then the turn. And the last bit. And then slowly, little by little, stitch it up. Next, you know that the right hand is basically the same except for the last 2 notes. It's just the left hand that you have to now be in a new position for. F in the pinky. There's your first bit. Next. Open up. Like that. Down little by little. Stitch it up slowly, both the bars. Once you have that down, start to incorporate some of those details that I mentioned. See? If you like that space, which I think I do, that's what kind of, for me, gives it a little bit more of that feeling of like a little mechanical music box. And just play around with it and start to, assemble this, because it's very simple to assemble, and then you'll have the freedom, once you have it assembled, to start to decide musically on how you'd like to phrase and how you'd like to balance out the hands, right? It's not just flat and the same everywhere, right? Decide early what you want to do with this so that you don't have to learn the whole thing and then decide on stuff, because then it feels as though you're learning it fresh. Just learn it now. Decide now and start to implement it immediately. And then we move into the next part. So I'll see you in just a bit. I think it's a pretty good start. All of the things that I'm mentioning in these videos, I'm doing it quite slowly in these early 1 or 2 videos, apply throughout this piece. So once you have a good sense of the first few lines of music, I won't have to go in such intense detail. Everything is going to be pretty much mappable onto the rest of the piece. Everything I've said will be mappable onto the rest of the piece pretty easily, pretty comfortably. Okay, not bad. I'll see you in the next one. Let's move on. Part 2.